Welcome to my interpersonal communications project. I am Natashia Selph, and this is for Liberty University for HSCO 508. Next slide. The introduction. A little about me. I'm 27. I'm married. I have 2 kids, a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old, both of which are in school. I have a bachelor's degree in business administration. Thought that that was what I wanted to do, open my own business and become a daycare provider, or work in a medical field in an office, just in an office, not really doing much. And now I am studying for my master's degree in human services, concentration, marriage and family therapy. I've had a lot of friends who's had troubles with their marriages. I've had families that have had troubled kids, and I want to be able to be there to help those people through their problems. Next slide. My overarching goal, I want to utilize what I have learned to better communicate and connect with others, and to follow the path God has placed me on. Next slide. My background and behavioral blend have influenced my conversation by teaching me that people sometimes just want someone to listen to them and not give advice all the time. Just an ear, that way they can figure out their own problems without having to deal with the input of other people. Learn to be more open, letting people know who I really am, instead of just sitting back in the sidelines and just agreeing or disagreeing with what people say about me. Letting people know who I really am. Being turned down when someone's wanting to speak to you. Like if you go up to someone and you start speaking to them and they walk away, or they go, no, not right now. I got that growing up from teachers and from family members, and it kind of hurt me. And so I always expect someone's going to turn me down when I want to talk to them. And so it's helped me to know that I'm not the only one that gets turned down to be talked to. Sometimes people act like they're paying attention, and they're not. They're just, nodding their head. But if you ask them questions about what is it you're saying, they won't know. Next slide. My behavioral blend is a CIS, and that goes on to talk about personality types from the Carbonell text, the DISCs personality types. And there are 4. D is the active task-oriented, I is the active task-oriented, S is the passive people-oriented, and C is the passive task-oriented. D is normally dominating, directing, demanding, determined, decisive, and is doing. I is normally the inspiring, the influence, the inducing, the impressing, interactive, and interested in people. S is steady, stable, shy, security-oriented, servant, submissive, and a specialist. And C is usually cautious, competent, calculating, compliant, careful, and contemplative. Next slide. We all have different personality types. None of us are ever really the same. And until we can learn that other people have different personality types and how to deal with those, we can't fully understand another's personality. What is expected of me is my S type, which means that I'm stable. I should be more humble. People tend to misjudge me. I feel inadequate and unworthy at times, and my vision is to help others. This fits me, I believe, exactly. I want to help others. I always see the better in people, and I do get misjudged a lot. They usually misjudge me as boring or something along those lines. This is me. My CIS behavioral blend means that I'm inspiring and impressing. I feel happy more than I do sad, and I'm friendly and compliant. I try to be friendly, and I try to be there for everyone. Sometimes it's hard because they don't understand where you're coming from, you don't understand where they're coming from, but I think that My behavioral blend and my personality type really does actually fit me. Next slide. What is interpersonal communication? Stewart defines interpersonal communication as communication that happens when people involved talk and listen in ways that maximize the presence of the personal. Stewart lists 6 features of communication: meaning, choice, culture, identities, conversation, and nexting. Next slide. Features of the personal that is described in the definition is the personal is what it means to be a person and how we differ from other animals. There's 5 qualities that help define that. Unique, unmeasurable, responsive, reflective, and addressable. Some more aspects of interpersonal communication is identity, inhaling, exhaling, how to cope with walls that have been built, and many other things. Next slide. Identity. Identity is made up of interlocking features that mark how people behave and respond to others. There are 4 characteristics: the multidimensional and changing, meaning that we are all complex individuals. None of us are ever alike. We all have different personalities, we all have different identities, we all act in different ways. Selves and responders implies both choice and connection, whether how we act with other people and how we act, just, us. They're developed in past and present relationships. They develop from your family, growing up, and then also from social interaction in the community, church, school, friends, and then can be avowed or ascended. Avowed is you assign yourself an identity. Ascribed is others assign an identity to you, which usually means it's not really who you are. And 3 things that I learned that you have to accept about yourself is that you will make mistakes. Your intentions are complex, and you have contributed to the problem. Next slide. Inhaling usually involves 3 sub-processes. Selecting. When you're listening to someone, you usually select what you want to hear and pay attention to. Then you organize those cues and what you listen to, and then you usually infer, which is to conclude or judge based upon what you only paid attention to. Mindful listening is another thing. When you're inhaling, you receive the spoken word accurately, taking in the whole message, not just parts of it. You retain that information, you sustain attention. Listening occurs over time, as the text says, and it's a process that you have to learn. And then you attend your speech and be sensitive. You just don't automatically jump out there and say, hey, look, this is what I feel about what you said. You have to be sensitive to what the other person is saying. And you encourage the speaker to be more open. So if they're not feeling like they want you to know more, try to get them to open up, letting them know that you're there, that you're not going to judge them. And hopefully that works. Next slide. Listening. What it can do for us. Burley Allen states that effective listening involves not only tuning into others, but tuning into ourselves. Effective listening can reduce stress and tension, which I have found out over the last couple weeks that if you're actually listening to everything the person is saying, you tend not to be as stressed out and wondering what is going on and how you can fix that problem. There are 3 levels to listening. Level 1 is empathetic listening. Level 2 is hearing but not listening. And level 3 is listening in spurts. I believe there are times I listen at a level 2 where I'm hearing but I'm not really listening. I'm only listening to what I want to listen to. Next slide. How you got to be the listener you are. An influence factor on how we listen is how we are raised as children. Some people are negatively stroked as children, meaning that they weren't really ever paid attention to, listened to, and so on. Social process, we get we get listening, how to listen from social environment that influences your behavior. So school, your friends, where you hang out, and of course school, and what you learn at school from friends and teachers is usually, if your teachers act one way, you see them acting that way as a younger child, so you believe that you should act that way as well. It doesn't happen all the time, but it can. Exhaling is another part of interpersonal communication. With exhaling, you have to be more open, which usually has self-disclosure, where you have to figure out what you want people to know about you. You have to speak from the heart, not just what you think everybody wants to hear, and tell your story with clarity. And there's 3 guidelines to that. Don't present your conclusions as truth. Share those conclusions where they come from, and don't exaggerate. And then help the understanding. Ask them to paraphrase back what you have said, and ask how they see it differently. And then when you're talking to someone or you're listening, do the same. Paraphrase back to them and ask, tell them how you kind of see it differently. And then, next slide. Conflicts, walls to bridges. Stewart defines conflict as the interaction of interdependent people who perceive incompatible goals and interference from each other in achieving those goals. There's productive conflict and destructive conflict. Productive conflict is usually interaction guided by the belief that all factions attain important goals. And then the destructive conflict is one side must win while the other loses. Next slide. Barriers, listener and speaker. Hearing only what you want to hear is a barrier. Forming an opinion about the value of what was said. In other words, labeling it as boring, unimportant, complex, or nothing new. People tend to do this a lot. And you can usually tell by their body language, where if you're talking about something and they think that it's boring, you can usually tell by their reaction. Physical, you're usually fatigued, you're tired, you're stressed out, and you really just don't want to listen to what the other person has to say at the time. And then somatic, not having the same meaning of words, where if someone says a word to you, they may have a different definition than you, so you might not understand. So that's where you should ask, what is your meaning of that word when you're talking about it. Next slide. Something that I found very influencing that I would like to try, and that I have tried a couple times with my husband, is the talker-listener card. This helps keep parties focused. There's 2 sides. There's the talker side, which is usually who's most bothered by whatever's going on with them, and then they own the problem as well. Goals for the talker is to share their feelings and their thoughts without accusing, attacking, labeling, or judging. Next slide. The second side to that card is the listener side, and they're calm enough to hear, and they don't own the problem, which means they shouldn't be giving advice unless it's really asked for. And their goals are to provide safety, to understand, and to clarify without agreeing, disagreeing, advising, and defending. Next slide. Solutions to noise pollution. When you're listening to someone, sometimes you can get distracted by what is going on around you and what is internally happening in your head. And so internally, you want to focus on the speaker, what the speaker is actually saying. So you want to try to tune out everything else that your brain is trying to process at that time. And external, you want to repeat back key points to the speaker, and then look at the speaker and let them know that you are paying attention with saying words like and continue, or ask them questions throughout. Thank you for watching my presentation. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great day.